By the way,
weird.
I'm looking out there and I see that we got two labeled number 5. Just FYI. Looks like the
Uh,
last one. Looks like
I,
it's doing that thing
I might
that
have
it did with me.
shared the wrong thing. I don't know. It should be. Yeah, it was supposed to start at 9:15. I don't guess the automatic start worked.
Mm,
I don't know.
shocker that.
Either that or it's just now kicking in because there's a big lag.
Well, let's go ahead and make sure we get like a confirmation before we just take off, and because it would suck to do the whole thing and realize that it hadn't recorded. Oh, here we go. I'm now getting the indicator. I must not. Yeah, I must not have been subscribed on my main channel. That's what it was, I guess. It's you got your OBS up.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
it should all.
let her rip, tater chip.
Yeah, no, it's all running. So really don't want to.
Okay, so I'm
I
monitoring
don't I
chat.
don't I don't like that I'm showing that screen right there. I'm gonna have to like reset some stuff after this.
You know what I do? I set up a. I mean, you do it however you want, but I set up a thumbnail for like that I want to ultimately use for the actual thumbnail later because you'll have to go back and edit that thumbnail. But it can be like on the screen for say the first 3 minutes, and that'll kind of cover that opening shot. Will be that thumbnail, not the interface.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so we're rolling. It is what it is. So yeah, I'm working right now on this is the cover of Apocalypse Girl #5 as it stands so far, and I've kind of saved this at stages too, or a couple of stages, not a whole lot, but there was a couple of different little thumbnails that I had in here originally before the publisher kind of got interested in having me do these painted covers, which I've been doing some paintings for other comic book covers with this publisher, and they've gotten some pretty good traction with readers. So we decided to go with all painted covers throughout the Apocalypse Girl series. And originally, I was just gonna do a vignette of this big bad guy, Cleaver, um, and I decided I really needed to bring it back around with 5 and 6, and because like through issues 2, 3, and 4 have characters other than Anna, the main character, on the cover, and with 5, I felt like it was like, well, I've got the villain, but I really want to make sure I've got her on there too, and then I already know what the cover #6 is going to be. #6 actually have three characters on the cover. Um, and um, I won't get into why because it reveals something about the story. But there'll be 3 characters on horseback. So, um, but then when I was working up, like I had originally was originally going to have do traditional inked standard comic art type covers, which is cool. I actually love doing those. Um, I'm really enjoying the whole painting thing. Like it's been nice to actually get traction for my painting work. Um, so I took this pen and ink piece and then basically used it to go in and create gray tones. Um, and kind of how I did that in here. If I turn on my black background, if I duplicate this, I'll show a little bit of this. Of course, I'm in. Mine says Manga Studio EX, but a lot of folks will know it now as Clip Studio Paint. So I duplicated this where I had this inked drawing, and I'm using a variation. There's a tool. If you hit J on the keyboard, it takes you into the blending tools, and there is a tool just called Blend, but then there's others, and I've made some custom tools inside here, and I actually altered the base default Blend tool so that I can have control of all kinds of neat things inside it. This is one of my favorite things about Manga Studio, Clip Studio Paint, as opposed to Photoshop. Like Photoshop, you can do crazy stuff with Photoshop's brushes, but there's a lot of things that you can't do with them. And there's a lot of stuff in here that you just can that are just really cool, including like just about every aspect of a brush stroke you can make visible by opening up the little toolkit window and then going in and, like if I turn all these on, you see all this stuff starts to appear in its panel over here. So you can just hide or show the aspects of a tool that you want available for that tool. And then there's so much stuff. Like I could probably do a 2 hour lesson just on altering and creating new tools inside here. It is, to me, it's like the most powerful thing. It's one of there are two aspects of Manga Studio that make me use this thing religiously. It's the ability to alter these tools, which is actually kind of sits on top of this aspect of the program they call the ink engine. But with the ink engine is the ability to do all the stuff with the tools. And then there's the what's called story mode. So like you have your pages all together. Like when you say I'm going to create a comic. You say, okay, I've got my cover, my inside, and 24 pages. So I'll create a 26-page document. And that 26-page document, like if we got a 2-page spread, you can tell it these two link together so they're one. So they go across a 2-page spread and all that kind of stuff. And then like if you want to edit, like a lot of times after I finish a comic, I may read back through it and realize that the contents of one page, think of each page as like 1 to 3 minutes of video, right? Like you've got a scene in a film, and I treat each page kind of like a scene from a film. And sometimes when you're editing, you're like, man, that scene actually would make more sense if I moved it over here. So you could drag and drop pages, and it will reorder the pages for you. It seems like a no-brainer. It seems like such a simple thing. But if you create all your pages manually, like in Photoshop or Illustrator, or you've drawn them by hand and scanned them all in, you have them all separate files, go back through and try reordering those. Like, it's annoying. It's incredibly annoying to have to sit and renumber those and then try to make sure that it's really obnoxious, actually. And so having this view where you can see the pages up side by side, like I've got my cover, inside cover, here's page 1. So then from there on, I'm always looking at, 2 to 3, 4, 5. Because if you understand print layout, it's always like a 2-page spread is always from the even number page to the odd number page. So 4, 5, 6, 7, and I can look and see what my layouts look like next to each other, and it's just really crazy handy. So I love that. But anyway, yeah, back to the blending tool. So I've got a number of little aspects of the tool made visible here, and what this will do is I will let's kill that. Come in here and just choose a brush size. And you can also set it so that you can see a circle for your brush size and actually see the brush size on screen. I don't like that. I like using the dot because I'm working on a Cintiq, and so I want to see exactly where my pen is touching. And so I'll take like what was this inked drawing and go through, and it might seem like it's just a smudge, but it's really not. It's actually treating that like oil paint. So I can then go through and blend that stuff and get these really nice gray tones. And you can see it's got this nice paintbrush sort of thing going on. It's very oil-like. I love the way it responds to my brush, to my hand. It's very it just feels like painting. It feels like oils. So I'll take something like this and spend some time going back and forth over, like I'll use my cross hatching. I mean, if you think about it, whenever you're drawing, if you're doing cross hatching, you're doing any kind of gradient like that's really what you're doing, whether you're doing like stippling or hatching or whatever. You're creating a shade of gray. So like from the black here, as the lines get further apart when you're drawing them, that's really creating a shade of gray. And so I just use those as a guide and go, okay, I'm just going to blend that out into an actual gray, right? And then you can see kind of the result like that. And once I have, if I'm doing this from an ink drawing, which is not actually how I paint most of the time. Most of the time I paint in a more traditionally painterly sort of way. But with this was just a good way to go. So I just blending this stuff out, and then when it's done, I'll come over it. Like I might say that I'm coming over it with washes, but essentially what I'll do is I'll throw another layer, an empty layer over top of it, set to multiply, and come over with color, and that color will multiply over this grayscale and give a very color wash effect that works really, really well. So, there's like a quick little look at the technique there, and then here's where that ends up going. Of course, I also scaled and moved that. So here you can see how all that gray, how all of that stuff ends up getting translated into these gray tones. And then after that, I'll take a layer over top of it, set it to color, and set the layer to, on this one I set it to multiply, and I'll just take a pencil tool, and let's choose I'm going to pick a basic skin tone for this guy, and since it's in multiply, right, I can just, this is what I mean when I say that I wash over it, because it literally has the effect of almost like it's actually like more like a watercolor wash than an oil, but I'm just painting that color right over top of all that grayscale, but it's in a separate layer, right? And then once I have some of this color in place, which, I can very quickly block all of this in. So we'll do just rough in his skin tone here. And then from there, I might switch my brush to other blending modes, which this is kind of neat. I have my pencil tool bound to the 1 key, and by toggling that 1 key, I cycle through different versions of my pencil tool, and you'll see if you watch right here, I have a lot of these are actually the same settings, but they're just set to different blend modes, and I like that. That way I can just quickly with my left hand cycle through all these blend modes instead of having to go over here, find it, click it, or come over here, click a drop down and all that. I hate that. That stuff takes time, and I don't like wasting time when I'm working on artwork. So like, if I keep that in multiply mode, when I come back over it, let's turn that opacity up a little bit and toggle down to a smaller brush size. So now, when I come back over that, it actually has a very watercolory sort of effect. And I'm just going to follow kind of my major forms and my shadows and intentionally be kind of rough with it. Like that. Okay. And more of this color gets tossed on there in the areas that have deeper shadow. And I'll even kind of go almost geometric with it. See how I'm just doing these quick strokes around there that, like I'm really not concerned about much other than just getting big blocks of color down on this stuff and kind of building up some forms. And it's easier to think about the forms if you approach them geometrically. That's being so much, having spent so much time as a 3D guy, that actually translates well into this approach to painting. It's because I'm thinking about geometry here and the forms underneath. Okay, and then if I keep going on this in multiply mode, you see it just stacks on top of it and blends in just like watercolors would, which in traditional painting I tend to use either watercolors or really watered down acrylics, and I'll alternate through brushes and airbrushes, and this has almost the exact same kind of feel. So that's really makes it very comfortable for me to do this way. Then once I have this kind of stuff in there, if I want, I might blow in a little. I say blow in, that's coming from being an airbrush guy. I might throw in a little bit of just some other color to knock in a little something else for some shadows or something, just a little contrast there, since that helps bring a little bit of life into some skin tones. And then you can do that a little more there with the shadow. The nice thing, of course, about this being digital is, like, say this stuff that I'm doing right here. If I end up just sitting here tweaking on this, and I like this better than where I ended up, then I can always combine the two together and pick the best of the two. So here I've got some nice alternating tones. I've got some shadows and stuff built in. It's all kind of blocked, and so now I'll hit J, which takes me to my blending tool, and I'm pretty much only ever using this custom blend tool, even though I have others here. Sometimes I might use these various watercolor based tools, but most of the time now I'm using this customized tool. So what I'll do with that is I'll come in and use it to just kind of literally, I mean, it's a blending tool, and I'm using it just to kind of blend between these blocks of color. And if I do this while this layer is still here, sitting on top of my black and white tone drawing, then it really is like I'm swishing around watercolors over top of it, and that's kind of cool. I really kind of like that as a method. And this actually, I know some folks who, for the sake of production speed, will use 3D assets and do like grayscale renders of 3D assets, and then come in and smudge the renders of their 3D assets to give it that painterly look from the gray rendering, and then go over and color it like this, and you can get a really pretty darn traditional paint effect that way that you can't really get otherwise with filters and stuff like that. I'm a little bit of a purist when it comes to this stuff because I've spent my life learning how to do it. But from time to time, if you're in a hurry or something like that, that can be a useful technique. So here I'm just blending this stuff together over top of that gray layer underneath, and you'll see how that sort of starts to even things out. And like, I might choose to leave some strokes really standing out here and there because it helps keep that sort of painterly effect to it. And there we go. Let's just blend this stuff all around a bit. There's a lot of subtlety to be had in that. So once I have this right here started to kind of muddy up a bit from where I tossed that blue in there. So once I have a bunch of color worked around like that, I might, let's pull that down a little bit. That needs to have a little more tonal value there. I might come through and add some brightness. So if I switch off, I'm going to cycle through my pencil back to one that's set to add, which creates kind of a glow effect. And if I hold the Alt key and click on here, I'm just going to sample up some of this color. So, and if I paint over that, you can see how that glow effect has. It takes that color, and it's a strange blend mode because there's nothing in Photoshop quite like it. So then I'll take that, and if I want to punch up some highlights, I can come back through with that. Say I want to get a little bit of a rim light around some of this. Very useful for that. This kind of thing, I mean, I'm using it here for a comic book cover, but it's also, all of these techniques are just art techniques, and they work really well for concept art, things like that. Um, if you're trying to work in like gaming as a concept artist or character artist, um, this kind of thing really, it's amazing how often this sort of stuff translates well into a way of describing a character, so that say the 3D folks have a clearer picture of what they're going to produce for in-game assets. Same with film. It's like a concept art sort of thing. So here I'm back with my blend brush, just blending this all together. And it's a hypnotic process. Like, I really love doing this. Um, it's actually become, working on Apocalypse Girl, this has become my favorite part of it now, is doing these covers. Um, like I could sit and do these covers all day long. Um, so this kind of started. I did a cover a while back for a book from Source Point called Beyond. What was it? Beyond the Demon, the Sea. It's a very interesting little book. It was a one-shot book, and they had me do a variant cover for it. Um, and they kind of gave me a great deal of creative freedom. So what I knocked out for that was a digital painting that the creators on the book were super happy with it, and I've seen a lot of great response from readers. So that's kind of cool. And then from there, the creators on that book had another book that it's called Touching Evil, and that one was fun. On that one, I did this painting of this lady, like there's like a severed head on a platform, and she's touching it, and has like a little bit of light coming out of her eyes, and this whole sort of psychic looking deal going on. It was pretty neat. It was nice on that just to cut loose on something that was kind of, it was horror, because that's really, I love doing horror art. So anyway, I really dig the way those tones look. I might actually like those better than where I ended up. Yeah, I kind of do. That's funny. That's funny. Sometimes it's really easy to end up overworking a painting. Um, so let's just let's combine these two layers together, and then I'm going to pull this up over top of this. This is like one of my favorite things about working digital versus traditional, is there's so many ways that I can just tweak on stuff, and it's so non-destructive. So like here, um, rather than using an eraser, I'm using my pencil tool, but it's set to clear. You see, unlike Photoshop you have foreground, background. In Manga Studio, Clip Studio Paint, you have foreground, background, and then you have clear. And what that clear does, it makes it act like like an eraser, but with all of its normal tool properties. So that's kind of cool. I dig that. So what I'm going to do here is just go through and erase out. Actually, I might do this differently. Let's throw a layer mask on here, and I'll invert the layer mask, and now come back through and paint in where I want to pick up those changes. Yeah, I like that a lot better. He looks stronger like that. A little more sinewy. This is he is the big bad character of this first Apocalypse Girl series. So I really wanted to introduce him on a cover in all his kind of tyrannical glory. And yeah, God, I like that so much better. That's cool. That's funny too. It's also kind of the difference between, working on something all day, because I worked on this thing like all day yesterday, and then went to sleep and woke up, came out, and was like, nope, got to fix that. I actually didn't think I had to fix it. I was actually pretty happy when I looked at it, but then start tinkering with it just for the sake of demonstration, and all of a sudden it's like, man, this is a much better route. This looks way better. So I'm kind of happy about that. So here in the background, you see where I've added Anna into the composition, and right here is where I did just a quick sketch for that. And let's see, do I have any process stuff? Yeah, here's a good shot of the process on that. So I did the sketch, and then just started blocking in, and literally, it's very blocky, these geometric areas of color. And so I just chose, I was like, okay, we're going to work with the 3 tones here for the skin, basically. We'll have the lightest, and then a mid-tone right here, and then I chose a kind of a reddy brown for the shadows, and really just block that all in like that. And similar to what I did, this is more my normal paint technique, by the way, is blocking colors and then blending that. So, and you can see here too, once it starts blending, I'll end up tweaking things. I'll adjust proportions and move stuff around a little bit. This is by no means finished. There's a ton of details and things that I'm going to be putting in on the lips. I'll be adding more shadows and stuff, really darkening in here. There's her face markings that need to be added in, and then obviously the details for the hair and the rest of this. There's a lot of work still to be done on this, but that gives you a good idea of the process involved, and and what I go through to do one of these paintings. So, yeah, that was the thing that I had on my mind for doing a podcast today and talking about this kind of stuff. I see in the chat we've got. I wish I could remember her name. I know her name's Cajun. She goes by, like, the screen name on there is Cajun Beauty, and I know her name in person, and I can never remember it, and I feel so bad for that. But yeah, if her or anybody else who's watching and maybe isn't in the chat wants to ask a question or anything, I'm here and checking that out. So in the meantime, I'm going to keep painting. I think I can collapse this layer together. So, and I know Mr. Brent is with us. Now, this isn't the comic book side of things, which is not necessarily his usual area. But, dude, you got any thoughts to offer, man? So I'm just kind of riffing on this right now. You still with me? Did I lose Brent? I think I lost Brent.
Oh,
there he is.
Only my attention. No, just kidding.
Oh.
No, I'm actually working on something else. Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is not my forte of subject knowledge, but yeah, I mean, it's all good. I just don't know much about this stuff.
Well, that's why I was saying, it's like, toss some questions out, man. Is people watching? Maybe, hopefully. Maybe not.
Here's my question: why are we building something cool this morning? Now you are building something cool. I'm just jealous because I can't draw. We always get into this conversation, where you're clearly on the side of traditional art, and I'm clearly on the side of people being able to make cool pictures for people that can't draw, which is your arch nemesis, so to speak.
To a certain degree. I mean, there's a little bit You
But
know,
like you said, you spent your life like enabling people to be able to do it, even though you don't want them to be able to.
it's not
You know.
that I don't want people to be able to. There's just a difference. Like I get a little irritated sometimes when the 3D stuff encroaches on the traditional stuff a little bit. Mostly because it's like I feel like a lot of times when 3D tries to be 2D, tries to be traditional, one, it can't. It just can't. Um, but when it tries, it's like it goes just far enough with it that it's like, I don't know, it feels like it just feels weird. Like I'm not a fan of that kind of thing to begin with. It's like if you're gonna do 3D, just own it and do 3D. Um, and specifically in comics, like I don't like 3D in comics. I never have. I never will.
But
And
you say things that are somewhat contradictory. Like on the one hand, you say you don't like photoreal, which I tend to really appreciate in 3D, and then you say you don't like
oh, your
paint.
audio cut out, dude.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you a little bit now.
This is so weird. You don't like it when people try to be photoreal with 3D, but
Yeah,
then you don't
you're.
like it.
Oh wait, I think I might be on my end. My headset might be going bad. Um, no, I like.
You don't like the paint over stuff, like where you render something in like the Haberlin technique, and is that the right? Did I use
The,
the guy's right name? You know what I mean? Like where they
yeah,
create it in 3D and then paint
Haberlin's
over it.
techniques. Uh, I got a love hate thing with him. Like I've seen him do it sometimes, and I'm like, okay, that looks really cool, and it can look really cool, and I can understand. If you're like, it's so conflicting for me, man. It's like I don't want to be that guy who's just like, oh, this is all garbage, but there's. I'll put it like this: the nice thing about Haverland, this is my props to Brian because I know the guy, is that Brian actually can paint and he actually can draw. And a lot of what he brings to it when he uses 3D like that is like he's as a painter, I'm pretty sure in the past he used to take photos and then like black and white photos and use those as reference and lightbox things and draw stuff from that to get like super realism and all that kind of business. Um, which back in my airbrush days I've done that stuff before. So there's a weird place where this stuff blends together and becomes a like it's like, well, okay, I'm not using a real person but I'm using 3D for that. That's where it's hard for me to be completely purist about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of especially in comics, a lot of indie comics that are done with 3D. That I mean, it's like I've heard people at comic book shows, like I'll go walking around and maybe see somebody who's trying really hard, and I gotta give them props for trying, but there'll be somebody standing there looking at their stuff, going, "Oh, you used Poser for that," and all of a sudden, there's this perception, which like to to the average
I know where you're going with this.
to the average comic book reader, to the majority of comic book readers, they're like, "Oh, you didn't draw that."
I don't believe that's the majority though. I think that's the
Oh,
people that
dude, trust me. Okay,
I,
of the two of us, who's the comic book guy? I've spent my
But
life in
but let me
comics.
just give you my perception of that. So I mean, I hear what you're saying, right? Like so, I'll break it down this way. Let's say that you put this image that you did right here online, and somebody went in and drew on top of it a few lines and said, "Oh, I made this better." And there's people that do that. Like, look what I
Oh,
did.
and
You
I
know,
detest that. I think
that's that's
that's
that's total bunk. I mean, that's really low life people that do that. So putting all those type people aside, because I don't think that's what folks that are trying to tell us. For me, as a filmmaker, story comes first before the film, before the comic, before the book. Story comes first, and I value story more than I do any of the like ways that you express the story. So, like to a guy like me, like I've made those 3D comics, like on 3D Comic Life or mywebcomic.com, whatever. I got a bunch up there, and they were just messing around, little musings for fun. But like I enjoy the fact that I can take Poser or Dash Studio and create a story, tell a story, and just the fact that I'm not able to execute on the level that I'll put it to you like this. I once saw a film by John Carpenter. I forget the name of it. It's Leviathan or something like that, where it's this really old 1970s, um, sci-fi film with a decent budget. Not Star Wars, but like models and whatnot for the ships, physical models, and it's everything that I hate about John Carpenter. Like all the main characters smoke, use profanity. I just didn't like the grungy look of it, and so I said to my buddy, I said, "Hey, that's a film that I wish was never made." After I went to this big film festival and watched it at this really great thing, and he goes, "Well, just because it's not, what you would have done or your version, it exists. Therefore, it has intrinsic artistic value." And I think that's where we're coming apart. we're diverging on opinions. It's like, no, I don't think it's as good as people that can draw, by hand. Clearly, that's a as far as better goes, that's a better way to do it, and even a more valuable skill set takes a lot longer. But do I think it's like worthless? That some guy that's like excited to tell a story does it
Oh,
with
no, no,
this
no, no, no,
inferior
no, no, no!
method? No, it
Don't hear
enables.
something that I'm not saying. Don't
I
hear
hear it.
things I'm not saying. I mean, that's don't. Let me put it like this: if the main goal is always to tell a story, and to me, if a story is worth telling, it's worth telling well. It's worth making everything about it the best that it can possibly be. Now, I understand as an artist and as a guy who gets paid for doing what I do with this kind of stuff. Um, the the person who has stories they want to tell may not have the budget to hire an artist like me to work on something. That's fine. And that's a great moment where that person, the kind of tools you're thinking about there are perfectly viable for that.
Well, you know perfectly, and you're cool and all because you're sharing your techniques and stuff like that. But like, those fan pages you recommended to me back when I was talking about trying to do respawner comic, they are full of some of the bitchiest of the bitchy when it comes to like people. And it's funny because like they're the same community. It's like, for example, the guy drawing is trying to get somebody to basically do the lettering for next to nothing, and the guy that can do lettering but can't draw is trying to get somebody to draw. And then there's people that think they're going to just talk people into telling their story in a comic for free. And you got all these various egos just clashing heads. To me, that whole community, like when I looked into that, I was like, ooh, like at this point in my life, I'm 50 today. At this point in my life, when
Oh,
I
happy
see
birthday, dude!
even
Oh,
thank you,
yeah.
even the slightest bit of drama like that, I'm just like, hey man, I'm gonna let y'all fight that out. But not my name's Bennett, and I ain't in it.
Yeah.
my name's Paul, and that's between y'all.
That's funny. Yeah, no, I'll be the first to concede that especially online, like everything else, there's a huge difference between what people do online and what they do in person. And I'll say, it's like the online community for um, well, the online community of comic book artists and folks who have or think they have that skill set. Um, Most of what you're going to find are going to be people who are trying to get off the ground, and you're going to find different attitudes among those. And what's funny is, it seems to me like most of the time, the quieter people, the ones who aren't jerky about stuff, the ones who might be interested in collaborative things and all that kind of stuff, um, to me, those are oftentimes the people who have the best chance of actually getting off the ground and making it. And they usually ruffle the least feathers, but also they tend to talk the least. Um, they tend to be the ones that you don't find as quickly because it's the ones who talk a lot who are also the ones who complain a lot and are the most vocal out there in those communities and make them look bad. Same's true in 3D. Same is absolutely true in the 3D community. I mean, through the years, I have to admit, I used to be super active in the 3D community, and now I'm just kind of like, yeah, no thanks. I pulled out because, generally speaking, it was the loudest, most obnoxious people, oftentimes talking the most, and and having these big attitudes and all this kind of stuff. And so what happens? It's a similar effect to general social media type thing, which it's funny because I just posted on my Facebook earlier about how basically it was like, hey, it's an election day. It's like local elections in places today, and I was like, there's no better time to bail on social media than an election day. I'm out because I just I don't want to hear people's crap. And it's the same for me pretty much all the time with art communities and the comics community and all that kind of stuff. And that's no negative necessarily against anyone and all that, but it's just and I could see where if you're not like if you're entertaining the idea of comics as a medium to tell a story that you want to tell, I could see. But you're not like a long-standing comic book person, and I think there's a real difference to be had there. Then venturing into that community to try and look for people to maybe work with is definitely gonna be daunting at best because, like I said, you're gonna see the loudest voices out there, and the loudest voices are typically gonna be pretty obnoxious. And among the artists, it's funny because the same is true among artists as it is among fans. The loudest voices, the most obnoxious and loudest, are the ones that get heard the most. And man, I as an artist, I get it. It's like we want to get paid. We want to get paid. Um, and it's a real catch-22 because I also am very conscious of the sheer volumes of work I've done through the years that I never got a penny for. Ridiculous amounts of work that I have never gotten a penny for. Lots of work that I've done for some pretty big name players in a variety of industries that for one reason or another I never got paid for, and I never will, and I know I never will. Um, Sometimes I think that there's a certain balance that has to be had where it's like a lot of artists, they're like, well, if you're not going to pay me, I'm not going to do this. It's like, well, you're an artist, dude. Here's some fact, okay? There's a bazillion of you out there, and there's a bazillion of you trying to get work. And they may all suck, but that doesn't matter. You may kick their asses, but that doesn't matter because there's a signal to noise ratio to be had here. And there's a lot more noise than there is good signal. And that means a lot of folks may end up accepting a little bit of that noise. They may go with somebody. In fact, a lot of times they'll go with somebody who maybe isn't even all that good just because they're like, well, I found this and it fits my budget. And there's a lot of artists out there who have this inflated sense of their own worth, and they will do their damnedest to just trash talk.
Boy, we know that's true. Woo!
They'll do their damnedest to trash talk anybody who they're like, oh, they're just trying to take you for a ride, or it's like maybe they've just got something that they want to do.
So yeah, so of course I'm not going to mention any names, but you and I have witnessed this multiple times where somebody will come in with a little bit of talent and a whole lot of mouth, and suddenly they're Johnny come lately, the new kid in town, and they're getting a lot of attention from the major outlets, and invariably they will burn those bridges. It might take a month, it might take a week, it might take 2 years.
Yeah.
But it always happens. It always happens.
And what's funny is there's an immaturity that comes in that you can see in that with artists who do that. And to be fair, I almost think that it's part of the development process because I remember a time when I was that guy. When I was a little mouthier than I am now, and was just a little more apt to to throw a little crap around, and. What's funny is like it's remembering that in myself that makes me able to kind of look at other artists who do that and be like, all right, kid, I get it, I get you. You're trying to, it's dude, it's funny. It's like the psychology of gorillas. It's grade ape psychology is what it is, because you get the young bull, trying to make a name, trying to come up. They're gonna beat that chest a little bit. They're gonna make some noise. You know, maybe somebody pays attention to them. Maybe they get a little traction. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But most of the time you don't, and um, most of the time it just goes badly anyway. But the funny thing too is that, like, that's the case for most people. Like a buddy of mine, my good friend Dave, Dave Flora. He's actually local here in Moorhead. Moorhead, Kentucky, and I'm so, like, one of my favorite things about having moved back here is being close to Dave. Um, he's I guess he's about 10 years older than me, and Dave and I met, jeez, when I was 18, and in the very very earliest days of me trying to get a career off the ground. Um, he was very much a mentor to me. He had gone to school for art. Had a lot. His wife at the time, they're no longer together, but his wife at the time had actually been had been a student teacher in my one of my high school art classes, and so anyway, Dave was like this real mentor to me, and he and I were we actually go to church together now. It's kind of great. Um, he he and I were talking the other morning, and I've heard him say this a few times. He's like, Les, he's like, said, it is statistically more likely to become a major league baseball player with a multi-million dollar contract than it is to make a living at comics, like as a comic book artist or as an artist even. And it just really made sense to me. It's like it did. Like, the first comic book show that I ever went to in my life was actually at the Javits Center in Manhattan. It was one of the largest shows in the world back then. I think it's come back to be one of the largest shows in the world now. It's the New York Comic Spectacular back then. Now it's just New York Comic Con. But at that show, there was like 30,000 people. This is in the early 90s. The numbers are dramatically higher even now. But there was 30,000 people at that show over the course of three or 4 days, I think. And probably a third of those people were artists trying to get work. So that right there tells you what that field is like. It's the competition is insane, just insanity. Um, and like, I've actually thought a long time about going back and writing some stuff about my own experiences and how I managed to get off the ground just as an artist, because I think there's a lot of things in there that folks interested in traveling that road, and, might find useful stuff that I know I wish I had known then. um, but point being, it's hard. It's really damn hard. And a lot of these guys online, if you go into a lot of these groups on Facebook or whatever, and you're like, hi, I'm a writer, and I'm looking for an artist or a penciler to work on a comic with me, to collaborate on a comic with me, what you're probably going to get greeted with is a lot of folks are going to be like, yeah, what are you paying? And I get it. I really get it. Um, if somebody says to me that, they want me to work on a book with them, I'm going to be like, yeah, what are you paying? Um, I've been a professional for 25 years. I can say that. I mean, not to come cocky about it, and that's not meant cocky, it's just fact. It's like, I do this for a living. It's like, I'm not going to go to a plumber and say, yeah, I got this house I'm working on. I need somebody to collaborate with me on the pipes. I'm not going to do that, because they're professional. You're going to say, how much? And you're going to shop around until you find the best price. So That's where I kind of understand why a lot of these folks are like that. Now, the flip side of it is, if you're a young artist, if you're a beginning artist, and you don't have any traction, you don't have anything under your belt, you don't have a title out anywhere, you have nothing at all, then you have to start somewhere. And the place you may start, it's to go to another sort of tradesman type scenario. Um, you know, the best mechanics oftentimes start out working under a tree or in a friend's garage somewhere, tinkering around, learning some skills before they start stepping up to go and open a shop or be part of a shop somewhere or go to school or any of that kind of stuff. There's usually a beginning that is very, very humble. And a lot of these artists you're going to find when you go asking in places like that are wanting to skip the humble stage. They're wanting to skip that stage altogether and just jump right to being a pro. It's like, dude, it doesn't work that way. You don't get that. You do not get to do that. Um, and it really, in a way, it makes it hard sometimes on professionals because it's just really weird. It creates these strange perceptions in a lot of directions that are problematic. Um, it's funny. It's another one of those ways that I'm not always super sure that the internet is actually all that helpful. Pardon me. My nose is still really stuffed up. My sinuses are killing me. So yeah, that's kind of my thought on that. And so all that going back to using like 3D and stuff for comics and that sort of thing. It's like if all you're finding are artists who are kind of giving you horrible pushback with that stuff, and the end goal is just get the damn story told. Well, there's a then I can respect that. I'm not hating on that. I think it kind of sucks in a way. Um, but I also think that there is definitely a place for that. So yeah, it's certainly not how I would go about telling my stories. It's not how I would go about doing my comics. And I think that if you can do them traditionally, you should. If you can find someone to do them with, then you should. But you know, it's not always the way. So, the uh, one of the better selling comics. Well, I shouldn't say. I don't know. Actually, I don't know what their sales were like, but one of the better stories being published by my old publisher before they went out of business, which is not to be ignored in that situation. Um, was a comic called Faith Fallon, which Mike, if you're out there and you hear this, I think it was Mike Height Kemper, I think is his name. So there's a little plug for you, Mike, because I know he's still doing Faith. He's got this kind of it's a very mature comic called Faith Fallon, and I know he's producing the artwork almost all with Poser. Of course, now I'll also give him props. He's one of the guys out there who's like using that and really going over it after the fact and doing a lot of stuff to make it not look like plastic poser people. So that's kind of an awesome thing. It's nice when somebody goes that extra route. And I even noted that on some of the stuff that you were sharing. I think the last time we were talking about comics in one of these, there were like some pages of yours where I was like, dude, these are actually really good, and they're very close to like it wouldn't take that much to push them over the edge into something that really would be on the better end of comics produced that way. So I think don't take it personally, man, because like you're not turning out the same stuff that a lot of people are turning out with it. And I think with just a little bit of work, you could actually push it even further. But point being, it's like if you can't find somebody and you want to tell a story, then it's definitely a viable route. Um, you know, um, it does come
I gotta pop out and do a little prosage, but I will be back in on the
pro,
stream. Sorry to cut you off mid thought.
prosage. Well, I'm
Yeah.
probably not going to be on for see 9:15, 10. It's 10:10. I'm probably going to cut it right at an hour or a little over an hour in, just because I do still have this horrible sniffly nose and sinus crap going on. But yes, I'll probably be off here by the time you come back. But yeah. So anyway, uh, if anyone in the chat wants to talk about this stuff, I'll be on here for a little while longer. And my main goal for today is to get um, this painting done, just done. So, and I'm going to be switching back into 3D mode. Actually, my main goal for this morning, like by lunch, is to get this painting done, and then the latter half of today, I'm going to be switching back to 3D mode to work on some products and things and all that kind of business, because I gotta balance my time. Gotta balance my time. That's the other thing too for me on these comics, is like the comics are not like, I'm not making money off these things yet. Um, I'm hopeful. I think they're going to do really well come January when they start coming out. But yeah, it's funny. It's like it's not unlike making independent movies, man. It's like you invest. You're invested. You put all that work in up front, and then you hope it works, and it may not. So yeah, but so that means I gotta keep that balance going. I gotta keep the 3D uh, engine running. So I know most of the folks probably who watch this are folks who are gonna know me from the 3D stuff, and probably don't want me to quit doing 3D. But I'll tell you, I'm pretty burned out on it. I wouldn't mind being able to take a sabbatical for a year or so and just focus on nothing but my comics. The 3D world it's a fickle mistress, man, and a very ugly, ugly business. I do not enjoy the business side of it at all, nor do I enjoy very many people on the business side of it. There are a couple, though. There are a couple who I would absolutely give some props to, but you know who they are. You know who those folks are. So I won't get into that here, because that's rather uncouth. But yeah. Anyway, we gotta spend some time with that later today. Man, I feel like I need to come in here and work on her eyes a little bit, and start to shade some of this stuff in. Really building up some shadows and whatever. Oh, brush density is something I alter quite a bit using this blending technique. So let me know when you cut out, so I'm not like talking to you thinking that I'm talking to you and you're not there. I think he's already gone. All right. Well, in that case, I will continue without Mr. Brent for just a little while. I'm going to pop over and look at the chat. I got that up on another screen. I think I'm just going to kind of fall into my own little space over here, tweaking on this painting for a bit. There we go. I really want to bring that expression back up for her. She's supposed to be really concerned in this shot. over wrinkle it though, because then that ages her, and I don't want that. There we go. That's better. Yeah. Yeah, I love doing this stuff. This is just, there's a hypnotic space that it gets into at a point like this, you know. Don't want to lose my forms, my kind of geometric structure in there. I do want to soften it just a little bit in this area. Smooth strokes come back into here. Soften some of that up a bit. Never have eyes that are completely white. It'll always look weird. Come in and pull a little bit of blending down from these lashes. I really want to get that eyelid form kind of popping a little better here, but I also want to make sure I keep that depth of shadow in there. I might duplicate this layer in a second and look at adding some touches to it to kind of work on the rendering of forms on there. I do think before I do that though that I want to add some hits of color to the lips. And I have this kind of habit of making her lips a red similar to her hair. It's not for any particular reason other than it's just kind of this way that I like to run the color palette on her. Let's shape that lip up a little bit there. I think I'm going to smudge some of this in here, smooth it, and blend it on back. Get kind of quiet here for the moment. I need to look into a good way to just have a music bed able to come up while I'm working on something like this. Sometimes I think that would just be kind of cool, you know, just to like throw open a stream and just have music playing while I work and just stream like quite a bit of it. I think some folks might just find that entertaining. I know I can get pulled into watching videos on YouTube of you know, different kinds of arts and crafts and things being made. just have a music bed going and just folks doing their thing. I think that's one of the coolest things about YouTube now is having all this stuff available is we can watch that stuff. It's just, it's entertaining. It's almost hypnotic, And you can learn from it, of course. And if I had a music bed to throw up, you wouldn't have to hear me sniffle. I don't know what it is either. I think it's just my sinuses because I know that I don't have a cold. I don't feel anywhere close to a cold, but just the sniffle is so annoying. Like that I'm getting a little of that gray smudged out there on those teeth. That's going to give me a little more. Feel something to work with there. Blend this on out here so it's not quite so obnoxious. Be careful I don't end up making her look like she's smiling right there. She is not to be smiling in this. And sometimes I want some strokes and things to kind of show through because they can really help kind of re-inform the eye on geometry and kind of surface planes and whatnot. There we go. Let's get a little closer to what I want. Getting a little closer. Zoom out. Oh, that looks much better than when we started. Alright. Let's pull some of this back over. Reinforce a little bit of something right there. That's going. There we go. Just refine that a little bit. I treat painting kind of like sculpting. You know, block in major forms, blend it out. Now then, I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer. I do that a lot. so that I have kind of almost like save points I can go back to. Now then, oh, where do I want to go? Where do we want to go? Let's come in here and I'll grab something that has a little bit of red to it, and a little bit of brown to it. And I get a little bit literal sometimes on these colors and things when I'm working on something, but then I might end up tweaking it back out later and going over it with one thing or another. I don't know, it's a process. I feel like this brown right here might be a little too low. So I kind of tweak on that a little bit. But then again, see, this is the kind of thing that I labor over all the time. Is, how far do I push an expression? There we go. That's a little better. Here I'm just kind of scrubbing back and forth over this with my blender. It's going to help give it a little bit of a breakup. Kind of like the way that works out. Of course, let's zoom out. It's starting to work out for me. I'm feeling good about that. So let's go to let's go on overlay brush. Grab some green. Actually, let's go multiply brush. We'll grab some green, relatively small brush size here. Go through and add some color to her eyes. Of course, since it multiplies as I stroke over it, it's going to have that watercolor thing going on, which is kind of cool. Okay. Now I'm going to switch up and use a pen for a minute. A smaller brush on it and set that to multiply. Now I'm probably zooming in. I'm definitely zooming in way too close because it doesn't need to hold up at that at that level of viewing because it prints much smaller. Here, I'm just going to keep going over this multiply. darken it up there. Okay. Now keep it set to multiply. Just take a gray, this pen, adding this kind of shadow right over the whole thing. Like that. Really like the effect of that. Yeah, I'm digging that. Now let's go back and take that same pen. Come in here and add some definition to those lips and teeth with that. Okay, pretty good with that. And I'm going to switch off to my multiply pen, or multiply pencil. And continue that same sort of effect. Basically washing over these dark areas to really build up some more shadows in there. Because I want her to darken up a little bit. I want it to be a little more menacing. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Nice. Yeah, dig that. Dig that. This is kind of weird because I'm so used to always doing her hair in ink, and it's like I get to do a color rendering of it instead, and color rendering is just so different at times. Let's just come here a bit. So the nice thing about having this, working on this duplicate layer, is if for some reason I wanted to kind of backpedal a little bit, I could just erase out and show what's underneath and combine that together. It'd be all good, you know. So for anyone who might just be joining us, watching or listening, or just catching this later when it's available for rewatch, what I'm working on here right now is the cover to Apocalypse Girl #5. That is my book. I am the sole creator on it, writer, penciler, inker, letterer, colorist, all that, and and sole creator on it, not by choice. Like actually, I was talking to my buddy Brent, who hangs out on here with us usually for these things. We were talking earlier about trying to get people to collaborate and work with you on a project and all that, especially for indie comics, and how hard it actually is. And like for me, it's like I love my comics, but I'll be the first to admit, it's like they are not my primary income, not yet. Um, and so my primary income's 3D modeling, animation, and stuff for the 3D content world. And in putting together my comic project, it's like, okay, well, I know that I don't have the funds to pay market, like professional industry standards for lettering and coloring and inking. I mean, my preference would actually be that I would just write and pencil the book, and I'd have full creative team working on the rest of it. But that's not the case as of yet.
Yeah, that's my preference too. I want to just write Respawner and have everybody to actualize all the actual work and hard stuff. That'd be sweet.
Well, writing's difficult. Good writing's difficult. Bad writing's easy. Welcome back, by the way. But yeah, I'd really prefer to just be writing and drawing the book and having working with a creative team for the rest of it, which is not as easy. I mean, because I have worked with creative teams on stuff before, and that's not it's not like ordering a burger. You don't go, hi, ink this, and then get something great out of it. It's like there's a lot more of the creative process in comics that is involved in those areas than folks might often think. It's like the joke, if you've seen that movie Dogma, Kevin Smith movie Dogma, which I love it, it's a great movie. There's Dogma, I think they make the same joke again in it's not Dogma, it's Chasing Amy. Chasing Amy is where they make this joke, which I love all the Jay and Silent Bob movies. So, I think they make the joke again in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. But there's a couple characters who are comic book creators. One's the penciler, and the other one's the inker, and they like co-write together. And every time the guy who's the inker, people are like, oh, you work in comics? What do you do? He's like, oh, I'm an inker. And they're like, oh, you mean tracer. You trace what the other guy draws. And
That's funny.
And they give him so much crap. And it's funny because it's such a common thing. I mean, I don't hear as much these days because I think people are starting to become a little more educated on what goes into comics and stuff like that. But it is a common thing. Like, oh, you just trace over what the penciler does. No. There's a whole damn art form to inking, and a good inker the inks will make or break a comic every time, and a good inker brings easily as much to the game as the penciler does, easily, because the inker ends up controlling the line weight, the light and the flow of light and darkness. There's so many things that the inker does. It'd be like you could be a great director and have great ideas for shots and all that kind of stuff, but if you're a piss poor photographer, you probably should get yourself a a good DP there. You know, somebody who's going to make those shots into the good shots. Like the angle may be great, the storytelling may be great, but the shot sucks. Well, you just wasted all that other effort. You know, and that's kind of what an inker is to a penciler. You know, it's like a DP. But you know, in my case, I'm wearing all the hats, and you know, I'm okay with that for now. The downside of it, the biggest downside of that for me, is just the time it takes. I mean, it basically means that I've literally been working on the 6-issue series for years. But you know, that's okay too, because you know, it's like, to me, in a way, it's like, okay, it just means I get to show that I can be dedicated, you know, and get it done. You know, even if it takes me this long and I have to go through X, Y, or Z to do it, it shows that I can get it done. There's a value in that. You know, you can't be impatient with something like this. That's for damn sure. Cannot be impatient. Getting impatient with something like this is a surefire way to kill it before it ever starts. Just rolling on through here. Add some shadows. This is where we get into, this is where we really get into what I consider to be the rendering stage, where, you know, we're really tightening up details and stuff starts to really come together. Like right there, I'm going to let that hard line stay, because then that'll really have this feel of being, wrong one. It'll feel like that hair is just dropping a nice big shadow down there. Yeah. And I'll even throw a few more of these down. Because then I always end up having some wild hairs going on from her. So I'll go ahead at this point and throw in some shadows that are actually going to guide where I end up drawing those wild hairs later. Right. So just want to continue rendering on these lips for a little bit. Lips can be so touchy to try and paint. If you want to get them kind of, you know, full looking, and it's very easy to end up having lips be over rendered, where you just keep working the painting until the damn things are just a mess. And I'm very conscious of my own tendency to over render in paintings, so I've been forcing myself to sort of pull back. Also really trying to keep in mind the, you know, there's like planes, you know, it's like something rounded, you can break it down into planes, and it actually works out really, really well for building up shapes in a painting. Here I'm going back through with just a regular brush pencil, and you notice I'm adding this brightness. Like I've got the light coming down her cheek face right here, so I know, you know, this is my light source over here. So this is definitely where I want the brightest part of these lips. maybe right here. Like add some of that in. And then let's increase that brush density. I'm going to work back and forth on this right here. Very similar to what I'd be doing with traditional paint. And it looks like I'm scribbling back and forth, but actually as I stroke, like right here, I'm off the surface so there's nothing being dropped. Then I touch right there, stroke through and pull up. And you get this rhythm going where you're doing that. You're kind of, you have this up and down motion along with the back and forth push and pull of paint. Right here, I'm kind of the same thing with just one direction, so I can just pull some of that red down. Connect on through there a little bit. There we go. There we go. Maybe a little bit bigger brush would be good right here too. You gotta be careful that I don't over render. You gotta be careful that I don't also overdo my light and shadow. Bottom lip's actually easier. Bottom lip tends to have less shape to it. It's a simpler shape, and bottom lips tend to catch a lot of light, which makes it easier to sort of pick out what should be rendered. Feeling pretty good about this so far. I think I'm going to do probably one more pass over those lips. Let's do that with a glow. Yeah, actually I can grab something kind of yellow for that. Yeah, there we go. Then once I have, now I do have a little bit of a rim light over here, so I can come in and just sort of accent that edge, and then we can blend that in so the lips then pick up some of that rim light. I really like having that yellow on there. I think that makes the lip pop quite a bit. Bring up brush density down just a little bit. We'll treat this almost like a dry brushing here, just to scrape. And I like how that yellow there is bringing out the ledge that is the form of the upper lip a little bit. I think that really helps define that. It's nice. There. Can really make that pop a little. Yeah, there we go. Like that. corner of the mouth is always an area that I find bizarre. It's very easy to screw that area up. And most of the time, the way it'll get screwed up is by overdoing it. I really like the yellow on the lip because I feel like it ties it to that sort of designy sun light shape over there. So that's kind of a cool thing. And I think in considering that color choice, I'm going to do a little bit of toning here. Of just, let's see, yeah, a little bit of overlay, very little opacity. That way I bring a little bit of that yellow in onto her skin too. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said that a lot of times I'm kind of a literalist at first until I get things kind of built up, and then I'll come through and I'll tone it so that it kind of all comes together. So there, see, I mean, we've got skin tone, but then we got that little bit of yellow in there that sort of helps tie this in. And let's sample a little of that orange and do the same thing too. I think that's going to warm her up and make her look much more alive. Yeah, I dig that. I hit some of this other stuff with that too, even though I haven't gone in and done details with it yet. I can just splash some of that color in there. Let's dial it way back and maybe even touch him with just a little of it. Like that. Like that a lot. Oh yeah, that's making that pop quite a bit. Much better. Much better. Now then, let's come over here and just blend some of this together on her. Let's really turn that brush density down. We just want to barely nudge this stuff around so it softens up a piece. There we go. I think I'm going to take some of that stuff there out too so she doesn't look quite so old. In the book, the character she doesn't know her own age. I'll be careful, I'm starting to overwork this a little bit. I may end up erasing some of it back to the previous state. Let's see. Oh, well, I think I might keep it. Some of that in there. All right. I add another layer on here and use it to build up her face markings. That's such an important detail to the character. Those are typically black, but I'm going to be treating them brown for now. And those run right there and right there. And I'll do a mark over here. Boom. There's 1, 2. Yeah, it doesn't start up that far. That's why I did this on another layer, because I really don't want to. I'll end up playing around with it. So, let's come from here. Here. It's funny. These are two simple lines, and they're like the biggest pain in the ass on her. That's 1, 2. I'm having so much trouble with that right now. Probably because I'm not thinking about the angle of her head. That's kind of important here. Alright. Here we go. Yeah, now we're starting to get there. I labor over these stupid things. It's kind of funny. Right there. There we go. Let's just do a bit of that. So then, where are we going from here? Where are we going from here? A little smudging, a little blending, do that. And then, there we go. That in there. Rim light. Right. Now a little overlay. Should bring that in line with these other colors a little bit. And then we'll multiply on that. Help drive home that it's actually black. Now let's blend this all together a bit. I don't want to be afraid either of having a good hard highlight on this, because this stuff is, in my mind, has a bit of a shine to it. So we can just treat it like that. That way it really picks up the light, picks up the rim light, and all that kind of stuff. Still not happy. Stinking shape on it though. So this is a wonderful moment for digital. One of those great moments where digital painting really gets to shine, because keeping your elements separate and working them like this makes life so much easier. There we go. Let's just come in here. Spread this. Right. I'm digging that. And merge that down. Okay. Let's go back to multiply. Just reinforcing shape on her nose here. Give a little bit more shadow definition there. Nobody likes drawing noses. By nobody, I mean me. The nose has such a crazy complicated shape. It's really, really tough sometimes to get to paint it or draw it. There's ways you can cheat drawing it, but in painting it, it's way harder. You have to kind of be on point with it. That drives me completely nutty. Let's get some brush density going. Do more definition on some of this. There we go. I like that. I also like having that kind of painty, smudgy thing going on there. Let's come in here and kind of refine that nose a little bit too. Here we go. I like that much better. I really like having that kind of hard line in there. I feel like it really reinforces the shape. There we go. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Be careful not to overdo it. I can get excited about a course something's taken and then end up pushing too far down that direction. End up screwing everything up. Let's bring back a little geometric feel right there. Good times. Good times. I'm showing my own lack of confidence in this area, I know. Oh yeah, I'm digging that. That's much more what I'm after here. Cool, cool. There we go. Don't paint the thing, paint the shadow of the thing. That's the rule. Don't draw the thing, draw the shadow of the thing. Yep. Alright, now let's work some of this in here so that philtrum area isn't quite so pronounced. Just soften that up a little bit. Yeah, I'll totally work the crap out of that area right there if I'm not careful. So I'm going to pull away from it for a second. Pardon me. That way. Just curious about that. I may end up hitting my undo key a few times here in a second. Whoa. Well, say it's getting about time for me to close this stream, but I will may do a short stream a little later when this is finished, just to kind of show the finished result. There we go, like that. Oh, I like that much, much better. Much, much better. Yeah. Yeah, man, we're close. We're close on this. Very, very close. Oh, loving it. Loving it. Might add some blood on his blade. Just cause. It's always tempting. Don't know how the Don't know what the requirements or if there's any restrictions and things, but I don't imagine a little blood on that blade would be a problem for anybody. Alright. Let's come back through here, just pull some of the hair a little bit. Let's go over and get multiply. I'm going to make a duplicate of this. And put a little bit of work into this hair here before I leave. I want to make sure that I don't overdo the hair here. So let's come in here and just find myself an area. Okay. Now, come back up here. And I'm going to define an area here. Leaving some up here at the top for rim length. Come in here, get some of this. Yeah, here we go. Hair is another area. It's so easy to over render hair. So easy. It's really best to kind of think of it in these big bundles. Pick some, just sort of try to do the shadows of those bundles. So I want to also keep in mind, you know, this has got to hit into the dude here. This is probably a really good place to kind of add some darkness so that he pops out a little better. Yeah, let's have some of that. So that's starting to really define that. Let's peel some of that back. This is really just blocking in color to help define the volumes of the hair. So a little way to go on that, but this thing is close. It's close. So I'll save my work, and we'll be bringing this stream to a close here momentarily.